The unbreakable prisoner. The crimson warning lights bathed Commander Kythorn's weathered face as his stealth ship lurched under enemy fire. Sparks cascaded from ruptured conduits while his hands danced across malfunctioning control panels. Outside the viewport, the enormous silhouette of Empress Valeria Nyx's flagship loomed, a kilometer-long leviathan of alloy and arcane energy that drifted like a metallic god through the stars. "Divert auxiliary power to thrusters," he growled, but the system coughed smoke in response. He was out of options. The mission had always been a risk. Infiltrate Valeria's throne vessel. Confirm the existence of the psionic suppression core. If possible, disable it. Most likely, die in the attempt. Tractor beams crackled around his ship, blue energy lances locking it in place. Through the comm system, a cold voice slid into the cabin. "Surrender immediately, human. Your vessel is now the property of the Eternal Empress." Kythorn's jaw clenched. At 35, he had spent more than half his life in open rebellion against Valeria's regime. His homeworld, Kepler's Rest, had been one of the first to fall. He had seen planetary governors brainwashed, families torn apart, and entire cities made to kneel beneath her four-armed elite, the Corvani shock troops. And yet, he had survived. Because Valeria's greatest weapon, her telepathic domination, had never worked on him. The docking bay swallowed his vessel with a hiss of pressure seals and a hollow clang. As the doors retracted, revealing platoons of crimson-armored Corvani soldiers, Kythorn exhaled slowly and let his hands fall away from the controls. The airlock breached. He stood. They didn't even speak, just stormed in and bound his wrists with shimmering coils of psychic iron. They dragged him through halls lined with alien banners, through temples of conquest and mechanized brutality, toward a throne room that had seen kings kneel and species go extinct. The chamber was built to intimidate. Obsidian pillars soared into the dark like blades. The floor gleamed like wet stone. Along the walls, holographic maps of the galaxy pulsed with real-time indicators of her dominion. At the center sat a throne carved from star crystal. Its light shifted with her breath. Valeria Nyx. She was taller than expected. Elegant. Terrifying. Four arms, each ending in long fingers adorned with impossible rings. Her skin, a pale cerulean, shimmered with moving sigils. And her eyes, dark violet, lit with tiny stars, watched him as a scientist might regard a dangerous, beautiful anomaly. "Commander Kythorn," she said, rising. Her voice wrapped around his mind like silk soaked in venom. "You are the first man in 1,000 systems to enter this room unbent." He didn't reply. He met her gaze. She descended the steps one by one, her long cloak trailing behind her like the shadow of a solar flare. When she reached him, she raised one hand. He felt it instantly, the pressure. Like fingers sliding into his brain, seeking purchase. Probing, testing, trying to latch on. But they slipped. Her brows furrowed. Impossible. She moved around him, circling slowly, her other hands beginning subtle gestures in the air, tracing ancient glyphs meant to peel back a mind like an orange rind. "You are completely immune." "Disappointed?" Kythorn said. Her smile was a glacier cracking. "Curious. And curiosity is dangerous." She stepped closer, until their faces were inches apart. "I could shatter your bones with a word. Collapse your heart with a breath. But you won't," he said quietly. She paused. The words hung in the air. "Why?" "Because you don't understand me. And you want to." There was a long silence. Then she turned and gestured to the guards. "Put him in isolation. Highest level. Mind dampeners, silence fields, reflective obsidian." She looked over her shoulder. "We'll see how unbreakable you truly are." The cell was worse than he'd expected. It was built for minds. For breaking them. Black walls that shimmered with warped reflections. A ceiling of cold light that never dimmed nor changed. And a silence so absolute that it made his ears ring with the rhythm of his own blood. Hours passed. Days, perhaps. Time was meaningless here. He meditated. He focused on the beat of his heart. On the feel of breath in lungs. On memories of Kepler's rest, before the fall. He did not dream. When the door dissolved, he didn't open his eyes. But he felt her presence. Like gravity. Valeria entered. She had discarded the ceremonial robes. Now she wore something darker. Sleeker. A bodysuit that hugged her like living ink. Her silver tattoos pulsed faintly with the rhythm of her heart. She watched him for a moment. Most prisoners scream by now. Beg. Hallucinate. He opened his eyes slowly. Most aren't me. She stepped closer. You are calm. Even now. Silence doesn't scare me. Her eyes narrowed. You think yourself immune to fear? No, only immune to you. She raised a hand. Air tightened around his throat. Not enough to choke. Just a warning. He didn't flinch. You don't know what I am, she said. You're lonely. The words stunned her. You've ruled alone for centuries. Surrounded by minds you can twist, hearts you can puppet. But no one sees you. Not really. Until now. She lowered her hand. Her breathing had changed. You assume too much. No. I see the cracks. In your voice. In your eyes. In this empire built on obedience. You built it because you were afraid. Her body went rigid. He stood slowly. He didn't advance. Just met her eyes. When did someone last speak to you without fear? She stared at him. Her lips parted. Then, with a sound almost like pain, she turned and walked out. But her presence lingered. As if she couldn't decide whether to leave entirely. And for the first time in living memory, the Empress who bent galaxies to her will couldn't control the way she felt. Unraveling control. There was no clock, no sun, no change in light to mark the passage of time. But Commander Kythorn could feel the hours in his bones. The cell, polished obsidian, soundless, shapeless, had become a study in emptiness. And yet, he was still there. Unbowed. Breathing. Waiting. The door didn't slide open. It evaporated. Valeria stepped in alone. She moved differently this time. Slower. The hard edges of her poise softened, as though some internal calculation had shifted. Her silver tattoos pulsed faintly, dimmer than before. She looked like a queen unsure of her crown. You haven't eaten, she observed. Kythorn, cross-legged in meditation, opened his eyes. Hunger strikes are symbolic. This place doesn't even allow for symbolism. She tilted her head slightly. You are unlike any human I have met. He didn't smile. You haven't met one you couldn't control. So you think this is about control? Isn't it? Your empire is. Your soldiers. Your voice. Your mind. Valeria moved to the wall opposite him and sat, a gesture so casual it startled him. Was there a prime, she said suddenly, and her voice lacked all its usual grandeur. That was my home. He waited. We were a telepathic species, she continued. Not dominant. Not invasive. We shared our thoughts the way humans share stories. It was beauty made language. Her eyes were far away now, drifting through memory. Then the devourers came. Parasites that feed on mental cohesion. They couldn't break us as long as we stayed connected. So they corrupted the connection. Her voice trembled slightly. We began to doubt each other. Feel things we'd never felt before. Fear. Anger. Suspicion. My people turned on one another. The devourers never lifted a weapon. They let us destroy ourselves. Kythorn listened. This wasn't a story for him. It was a wound being lanced. I survived, Valyria whispered. And I swore it would never happen again. So you built an empire where only one mind could speak, Kythorn said. I became the speaker, she said, voice brittle. I became the protector. The shield. You became the jailer. She didn't flinch. Instead, she turned to face him fully. Her eyes shimmered. I was alone for so long. And then, I felt your mind. Your silence. You're like a missing piece of something I thought destroyed. Kythorn stood slowly, his expression careful. Your power doesn't work on me because it was never meant to, he said. You call it a gift. But maybe it was a curse. Maybe your people weren't meant to rule minds. Just to share them. Valyria blinked rapidly, fighting something inside herself. Do you know what it is to hear every lie before it's spoken? Every betrayal the moment it's conceived. There is no trust. Only knowledge. And knowledge becomes paranoia. He took a step closer. I don't know that. But I know what loneliness does to people. I saw my mother lose her voice after the conquest. She stopped talking because no one around her remembered how to listen. Valyria looked down. A tear traced its way along one silver mark. I don't want to be a tyrant anymore, she whispered. He reached out slowly and touched her hand. Then stop. It's not that simple. Nothing worth doing ever is. They stood like that for a long moment, not ruler and prisoner, not predator and prey. Just two minds, one fractured by power, the other whole through resistance, slowly aligning. She pulled away gently. There are others who would stop this change. High Commander Lorvek suspects your influence. Then let him. She shook her head. He commands the Corvani. They are bred for obedience. And for war. Kythorn stepped back, letting her go. Then you'll have to decide. Do you trust me enough to risk your empire? Valyria looked at him like he was a question she never expected to ask, let alone answer. I think, she said slowly, that I want to. The door reformed between them with a whisper of molecular cohesion. She stood on the other side for a moment longer than necessary. Then she was gone. And Kythorn's breath came slow and even. Because something ancient and monstrous had cracked. Not with force. But with truth. The unspoken alliance. The days following their last conversation blurred into one another like colors on a wet canvas. The silence of the cell was gone, replaced by a subtle hum. The food tray was fresher. The light, just slightly warmer. Commander Kythorn knew what these signs meant. He was no longer a prisoner. Not entirely. When the door opened again, Valyria did not enter. Two Corvani guards flanked the threshold. They said nothing, but their presence spoke clearly, follow. Kythorn rose without resistance. They led him not to the throne room, but to a narrower corridor lined with crystalline inlays that pulsed with soft lavender light. The destination was a suite. Not opulent, but not austere. Neutral. A midpoint. Valyria stood near the window, her four hands clasped behind her back. Her skin caught the light of a distant star, and for a moment she seemed almost at peace. You've been moved, she said without turning. I noticed. We're being watched. Kythorn looked up. Discreet lenses. Audio scramblers humming just out of earshot. Hidden defenses. All expected, then let them watch. Valyria finally turned. Her expression was composed, but her eyes were galaxies of quiet war. Lorvek grows suspicious. He believes I am being influenced. You are. A flicker of something, amusement. Indignation, crossed her face. We must proceed carefully. Careful doesn't win rebellions. Careful prevents bloodshed. He stepped closer, so does change. Real change. Not cosmetic gestures. You built this empire to protect people from the devourers. But now you've become something they fear just as much. And you propose what? Abandon everything I've created? Let chaos reign again? No, he said gently, let people choose. Give them something you never had. Freedom. She turned away, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Freedom isn't safe. Neither is loneliness. The words landed like a stone in a still pond. She breathed in sharply. I want to trust you, Kythorn. But trust has been my greatest weakness. Then let it be your greatest strength. In the days that followed, they met in secret. Sometimes in the suite. Sometimes in the inner gardens, engineered forests under artificial sunlight, where false birds sang and the air smelled of lilac and metal. They debated governance. Philosophy. The balance of fear and loyalty. She revealed how her telepathic network operated, a vast lattice of synaptic echoes powered by the mind stones of 1,000 conquered worlds. It was efficient. But brutal. They call it the whisper, she said one evening, seated beside him beneath a glass canopy of stars. Because they never know if their thoughts are their own. Kythorn had said little in return. Just reached out. And for the first time, she took his hand. Lorvek made his move soon after. A formal complaint to the High Tribunal. Surveillance leaks. A manufactured scandal involving falsified orders and unauthorized access to the Imperial Core. He wants a hearing, Valeria said as she paced the suite. But not to resolve anything. To humiliate. To provoke a purge. Then don't give him one. If I ignore the tribunal, I signal weakness. If I respond, I validate his claims. Unless, Kythorn said, you change the game. She stopped. How? Give the people a forum. A real one. Open a line between you and the outer colonies. Let them speak. Unfiltered. They will hate me. Maybe. But they will speak. And you will listen. And for the first time in centuries, they will know the Empress sees them. Her voice was soft. What if I fail? Then you'll fail with your dignity intact. And not as a tyrant, but as a leader who tried. She studied him. You believe in me. I believe in who you could be. And then, for the first time, she kissed him. Not as a show of power. Not as conquest. But as confession. The next transmission from New Carthage was brief. Dr. Uran, chief scientific officer of the Resistance, appeared on the secured channel. A gaunt man with iron-gray hair and cybernetic eyes, he wasted no time. We intercepted Corvani fleet movements near Titan's edge. Lorvek is mobilizing. He'll claim it's a precaution, but it's a preemptive strike. If you don't act now, he'll declare martial rule. Valeria stood behind Kythorn during the transmission. Her hand rested lightly on his shoulder. Then it's time, she said. For what? Uran asked. To change everything. Cracks in the throne. The broadcast chamber had not been used in centuries. Once, it had served as a ceremonial hall, a place where emperors gave speeches to the stars. But since Valeria's rise, her voice had required no amplification. Minds, after all, didn't need sound to obey. Now, she stood at the chamber's heart. The glass floor revealed the imperial capital below, miles of glittering arcologies, pulse highways, and sky gardens. Above her, the vaulted dome shimmered with projection nodes tuned to relay her every gesture and word to millions of worlds. Open the feed, Valeria commanded. Kythorn stood behind her, silent, steady. Guards flanked every exit, but none had weapons drawn. They didn't know whether she was addressing allies or abdicating. The stars blinked into place across the dome. Then faces. Billions of them. From Kepler's Rest to Uran 6, from Drava colonies to the whispering moons of Selkon. All eyes turned to the woman who had ruled without question. Who had never once asked. I speak today, Valyria began, not as your empress, but as one of you. As someone who has known fear. And who has used it. Gasps rippled through the networks. I have silenced your minds to protect mine. I have justified domination in the name of peace. But peace without choice is slavery. Kythorn watched the screens. Not all reactions were kind. Some shouted. Some cried. Some cursed her name. But many listened. I will dismantle the psionic control lattice. Not tomorrow. Not after a tribunal. Now. Behind the chamber, Dr. Urin stood at a control console. A signal pulse shot from the tower, and across 1,000,000 light-years, the whisper began to fall. First to go were the outer colonies. The silence that had hovered like a storm lifted. Thought became private again. Free. Back on the flagship, alarms erupted. High Commander Lorvek had declared an emergency protocol. He was already on the bridge. She has lost control, Lorvek growled. His 3 upper arms gestured in command signals as his lower hand held the emergency override chip. Divert all fleets to Axis formation. Disable long-range communications. Lock down Imperial Throne Zone. His aides hesitated. You have your orders. We do, said one calmly. And then the lights cut. The override was useless. On the main screen, Valyria appeared, her image piercing the blackout. Lorvek, she said, voice even, stand down. This is not a coup. This is a transition. To what? Chaos? Weakness? Betrayal? To choice. You are compromised. I am human, she said, not in blood. But in pain. In hope. And in failure. Kythorn stepped into frame beside her. That was the moment. When the galaxy saw her not alone. Not invincible. Not a god. But a person. Lorvek was not so easily deterred. Within hours, he launched his rebellion. 12 Corvani dreadnoughts converged on the capital. Civilian fleets scrambled. Communications jammed. Psychic shockwaves battered systems as loyalist factions attempted to re-establish the lattice. He's forcing our hand, said Dr. Urin, sweat beading along his temples. We can reroute the throne world's defense grid, offered Sub-Commander Nail, one of the few Corvani who had defected. We don't need full dominance, Valyria murmured. Only projection. Kythorn caught her meaning. Don't, he said softly. If I don't stop him, he destroys what we built. And if you use your powers again, you prove him right. She faltered. The war inside her was visible. Her fingers twitched with restrained potential. Then she looked at him. And chose. The dreadnoughts breached orbit. Anti-orbital platforms engaged. Explosions tore across the sky. Valyria refused to dominate minds. Instead, she broadcasted. Real-time feeds. Open frequencies. Unfiltered data. She showed every civilian the truth. Lorvek's lies. His ambition. His fear. And one by one, ships turned. Some didn't. The battle was brutal. Dozens of ships fell. Thousands died. But in the end, Lorvek stood alone. Surrounded by his own men. You should have controlled them, he spat at Valyria. I did, she said. But not with fear. And with that, he was taken. That night, the stars above the capital were quiet. Valyria stood on her balcony, silver tattoos faint, body wrapped in a simple cloak. Kythorn joined her, 2 cups of still steaming kava in hand. You look tired, he said. I feel free, she replied. He smiled. Freedom looks good on you. The fall and rise. The galaxy didn't change overnight. Revolutions never do. But something shifted in the days following Lorvek's defeat. A stillness. Like the moment after a breath, before the world exhales again. Valyria was no longer empress. Not in title. Not in command. She had not abdicated formally. But her voice was no longer the voice of power. And the universe was listening to a new sound, silence. Honest, terrifying, beautiful silence. We need to build something new, said Kythorn, as he sat across from her in a council chamber lit by starlight and unspoken tension. The room was filled with representatives, Corvani generals, human envoys, Selkon historians, Horithian trade barons. Some still wore weapons openly. Others looked like they hadn't slept since the lattice fell. Valyria nodded slowly. No more mind control. No more enforced unity. Self-rule, said Dr. Urin. Planet by planet. Region by region. A representative confederation. The debate was fierce. Some demanded reparations. Others sought to exile Valyria permanently. But when she stood to speak, the room quieted. I have done what no ruler should, she said. I bent the will of an entire civilization to my fears. A pause. I will spend the rest of my life undoing that. And not one voice raised an objection. The transition took months. Worlds' long silence discovered their voices. Revolts turned into dialogues. The former Imperial fleet split, some choosing local defense, others swearing themselves to the new Galactic Council. Valyria traveled. To Kepler's Rest, where she walked openly in streets that once shook with her psychic pulse. To Wazera Prime, now a crystalline graveyard orbiting a dead sun. She didn't speak much on those journeys. She listened. And everywhere she went, she brought Kythorn. He became something strange. Not a consort. Not a figurehead. A bridge. Between past and future. Between fear and hope. I don't know what to call you, said one young diplomat from Siltheran. Kythorn smiled. Neither do I. The last act came quietly. In the old imperial throne room, now stripped of banners and crystal, Valyria stood before a crowd of students, refugees, and former officers. Power is a lie, she said. Connection is the truth. She turned to Kythorn. I have spent 300 years ruling. I would like to spend the rest of them living. He extended a hand. She took it. They settled on a station above Selkon, a neutral trade world with long seasons and slow sunsets. No palace. No guards. Just stars. Some days, Valyria wrote. Other days, she watched the skies. Kythorn trained new leaders. Not in battle, but in listening. Years passed. The whisper became legend. The Tyrant Empress, a cautionary tale with an unexpected second act. And sometimes, when the stars aligned just right, children asked the old question. Was it true that she could bend entire planets to her will? And the answer came, always soft. Yes. But in the end, she chose not to. One morning, Valyria stood on the observation deck as twin suns rose over Selkon. Kythorn joined her, as he always did. They say there's a monument going up on Wazera Prime, he said. A tomb. A garden. A new kind. Rooted in silence. She closed her eyes, letting the light warm her. I like that. He took her hand. No lattice. No control. Just trust. And love. The rain had ended. But something better had begun. End of story. Her reign was built on terror, and ended the day a human stepped in.